She had learned early how to walk softly in that house. Not because the floor was fragile, but because peace there was. Every step felt like it could turn into a mistake. Every sound felt too loud. She kept her head low, her eyes down, and her words few. Since her father remarried, the house no longer felt like home. It felt like a place she had to survive. She was still young, but life had already taught her caution. Her mother had passed away years ago, leaving behind memories that were warm but fading. After that loss, her father tried his best, at least in the beginning. But work kept him away, and loneliness pushed him into a new marriage faster than anyone expected. He believed he was bringing stability back into their lives. He did not see the storm he was inviting in. Her stepmother entered the house with a calm face and polite words. At first, everything seemed fine. She smiled in front of relatives and neighbors. She spoke gently when others were around. But inside the walls of the house, her tone was different. Her patience was thin. Her eyes were sharp. And her expectations were heavy. The girl tried hard to please her. She cleaned without being asked. She finished her schoolwork early. She stayed quiet during meals. She thought that if she behaved perfectly, the house would stay calm. But no matter how careful she was, something always went wrong. That morning started like any other. The sun came through the small window of her room, landing on the corner of her bed. She woke up early as usual. Her father had already left for work. The house was quiet, but the silence felt tense, like it always did when only the two of them were home. She washed her face, tied her hair neatly, and stepped into the kitchen. Her stepmother was already there, moving around quickly. Pots clanged. Cabinets shut harder than needed. The girl greeted her softly. There was no reply, only a short glance that made her stomach tighten. She was given chores for the day. Sweep the floor. Wash the dishes. Fold the clothes that had been washed the night before. Nothing unusual. She nodded and got to work. The clothes were placed on a chair near the window. As she folded carefully, her hands paused at one dress. It was light-colored and neatly pressed. She recognized it immediately. Her stepmother liked that dress very much. She wore it on special occasions and often reminded everyone how expensive it was. The girl handled it gently, afraid of doing anything wrong. She folded it slowly, making sure the edges were even. Just as she finished, she heard her stepmother call from the other room. The voice was sharp, impatient. She stood up quickly, forgetting for a moment that the dress was still on the chair. As she turned, her elbow brushed against a cup of water sitting nearby. The cup tipped over. It all happened in seconds. Water spilled across the chair, soaking straight into the dress. Her breath caught in her throat. She froze, staring at the spreading wet stain. Her heart began to pound so hard it felt painful. She grabbed the dress instantly, trying to shake off the water, trying to press it dry with her hands. But the fabric darkened, the mark growing larger. Her hands started to shake. She knew this was bad. Very bad. She rushed to the sink, hoping she could rinse it properly and dry it before anyone noticed. Her thoughts raced. Maybe if she cleaned it quickly, it would be fine. Maybe it wouldn't leave a mark. But before she could do anything, her stepmother appeared in the doorway. Her eyes went straight to the dress. For a moment there was silence. Then her face changed. The calm mask dropped completely. "What did you do?" she asked, her voice low but sharp. The girl tried to explain. Her words came out broken, rushed, full of fear. She said it was an accident. She said she was sorry. She said she would fix it, but none of it mattered. Her stepmother grabbed the dress from her hands and held it up. The wet fabric clung together, the stain clear and visible. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" she snapped. "Do you know how much this costs?" The girl shook her head, tears already filling her eyes. She whispered another apology. That only made things worse. Her stepmother's voice rose. She accused her of being careless, of having no respect, of ruining things on purpose. Each word hit like a slap. The girl stood still, shoulders tense, eyes on the floor. She wanted to disappear. Neighbors passed by outside. The world continued as normal. But inside the house, something had shifted. The accident was small, but the reaction was not. Her stepmother continued to scold her, bringing up old mistakes, things from the past that had nothing to do with the dress. Every spilled word carried years of anger. "You're just like your mother," she said suddenly. The words cut deep. The girl's chest tightened. She didn't speak. She couldn't. Her mother was the one person she missed every day. Hearing her name used like that hurt more than the shouting. Her stepmother turned away, holding the dress as if it were ruined beyond repair. She ordered the girl to clean the rest of the house and stay out of her sight. The girl obeyed as she swept the floor. Her tears fell quietly. She wiped them away quickly, afraid of being seen. Her hands moved automatically, her mind somewhere else. She kept replaying the moment the water spilled. If only she had been more careful. If only she had moved slower. If only she hadn't stood up so fast. She blamed herself. Even though deep down she knew it was an accident. By afternoon, the house felt heavier. Her stepmother moved around with cold silence, occasionally glancing at her with a look that made her feel small. The dress hung nearby, still damp, like a reminder of her mistake. When her father returned home that evening, the girl hoped things might calm down. She watched the door closely, waiting for the sound of his steps. When he finally walked in, tired and distracted, she felt a small sense of relief. Her stepmother greeted him sweetly. Her voice softened instantly. She spoke about her day, about the house, about small things. The girl stood in the corner, unnoticed. The dress was mentioned briefly. The story was changed. The accident was described as carelessness. The girl opened her mouth once, wanting to explain. But the look from her stepmother stopped her. Her father sighed, rubbing his forehead. He told her to be more careful next time. That was all she nodded. That night, she lay awake in bed, staring at the ceiling. Her heart still felt tight. She replayed the day over and over, knowing something was wrong. The anger over a single dress felt too big, too intense. She did not know it yet. But this accident was only the beginning. One small mistake had opened the door to something much worse, and the house that already felt unsafe was about to become unbearable. The next morning started quietly, but the air in the house felt heavier than ever. She woke up with a dull ache in her chest. The memory of the previous day's scolding haunted her. She tried to push it away, telling herself that it was just one mistake, that accidents happened, and that everything would be fine if she just kept her head down and did as she was told. She walked to the kitchen carefully, her movements slow and deliberate. Every step was measured, as if she could control the tension in the house by controlling herself. Her stepmother was already there, moving quickly, her eyes sharp and her lips pressed tightly together. The girl greeted her softly, hoping for even the smallest acknowledgement. There was none. Only a curt nod, her eyes flicking toward the still damp dress hanging nearby. Breakfast was quiet. The girl sat at the table, careful not to make any noise. She poured a cup of tea for herself, trying not to spill a drop. Her stepmother moved around the kitchen like a storm contained in a human form. The clatter of dishes was louder than usual, and the girl flinched at every sound. She knew better than to complain or ask questions. Once breakfast was over, the girl was given her chores. Sweep the floors, dust the furniture, wash the remaining dishes, and then fold the clothes again. She nodded and began her work. As she cleaned, she kept her thoughts to herself, her mind circling the events of yesterday. She could not understand why a single accident had caused so much anger. She kept wondering if she had done something wrong in life. She had been careless in ways she could not even remember. Her stepmother's anger was not contained to that one moment. It followed her throughout the day. Every word she spoke had a sting. Every glance reminded her that nothing she did would be enough. She could scrub the floors until her hands hurt, wash dishes until they shone, and still her stepmother would find a reason to criticize her. The girl began to move more quietly, almost holding her breath with every action, hoping to escape the constant judgment. At one point, the girl tried to make the bed neatly, smoothing out wrinkles and tucking the sheets carefully. Her stepmother walked in suddenly, glancing at the bed, and then at the girl. She did not smile. She did not say thank you. Instead, She shook her head slightly, a subtle gesture that spoke volumes. The girl's stomach tightened. No matter how hard she tried, it was never enough. Hours passed. The girl moved from one task to another, her body tired, her heart heavier with each passing moment. She remembered how her mother used to encourage her, telling her that mistakes were part of life and that she was loved no matter what. That memory was a faint light in the darkness, a reminder of what home used to feel like. But now, the warmth of her mother's words felt like a dream from a different life. The day continued, and small moments kept testing her. A glass slipped from her hands while washing, narrowly missing the sink, and her stepmother's eyes widened in anger. Words followed quickly, sharp and cutting. She was accused of being careless again, of having no sense of responsibility, and of not caring about anyone but herself. The girl tried to explain, tried to apologize, but her voice faltered, and her words came out in stammers. Nothing she said mattered. She spent the afternoon cleaning the house, folding clothes, and organizing the kitchen. Each task was completed with precision, but the approval she longed for never came. Her stepmother's presence hovered over her like a shadow, reminding her that a single mistake could make her life unbearable. By evening, girl's hands were sore, her feet ached, and her mind was heavy. She moved slowly, exhausted, but still careful to avoid another mistake. She hoped that when her father returned, he would notice her hard work, that he would see how she tried to make the house peaceful. But when he came home, tired and distracted from his long day, he barely glanced at her. Her stepmother greeted him with a smile, recounting her day with light words, masking the tension of the morning. The girl stood quietly in the corner, hoping her presence would not draw attention. Dinner was silent, the air thick with unspoken words. The girl ate slowly, aware that every movement was watched. Her stepmother made small remarks about how things should be done, criticizing even minor details. The girl nodded and tried to comply, feeling smaller and smaller with each passing moment. After dinner, she returned to her chores. She washed the remaining dishes, wiped the counters, and organized the kitchen. Her hands were raw, and fatigue settled deep in her bones. She moved slowly, each task taking longer than it should. Her stepmother occasionally glanced at her, frowning or shaking her head, never offering a word of encouragement. By the time the house was finally quiet, the girl sat on the edge of her bed, exhausted. Tears threatened to fall, but she swallowed them down, knowing that crying might only bring more anger. She thought about the accident, the spilled water, and the ruined dress. She thought about how quickly a small mistake had grown into something unbearable. She wondered if her stepmother had always been this way, or if something had changed inside her, something she could never fix. The night passed slowly. She lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the faint sounds of the house settling. The shadows of the room seemed larger, and the silence was heavy. She felt small, insignificant, and trapped. She missed the warmth of her mother, the gentle words that had once soothed her fears, and the feeling of safety that now seemed impossible to find. Sleep came in fitful bursts. Dreams were haunted by yesterday's events, the scolding, the anger, and the constant feeling that she could never do enough. She woke up several times, her heart racing, and each time, the fear returned. The next morning, she awoke with the same heaviness. The cycle of fear, punishment, and exhaustion continued. Every day became a test, a challenge to survive. To move carefully through a house where approval was scarce and anger was easy, she began to realize that she could not rely on anyone in that house to protect her. She had to protect herself. The girl began to plan, quietly in her mind. She would do her chores, stay out of trouble, and avoid accidents at all costs. She would not speak unless spoken to, would not ask for anything, and would move as quietly as possible. She would survive no matter what. That small accident had shown her that life in that house could be harsh, unforgiving, and dangerous. Survival became her focus, her guiding thought, her only goal. Even though she felt trapped, a tiny part of her held on to hope. She remembered the times when her father had been kind, when her mother's memory brought warmth, and when life had seemed simple. That hope was fragile, but it was enough to keep her moving forward, enough to keep her folding clothes, cleaning dishes, and walking carefully through the house, day after day. Her stepmother did not let her forget the dress or the accident. The ruined fabric remained a symbol of her failure, hanging in a visible spot as a constant reminder. Every glance at it brought fear. Every thought of it brought guilt. The girl learned quickly that in this house, even small mistakes had consequences far greater than she could imagine. And so the days passed, each one filled with careful movements, silent obedience, and a constant effort to avoid anger. The accident that seemed small had opened a door to a life filled with tension, fear, and the constant need to survive. She knew deep down that she could not change her stepmother, could not control her anger, and could not undo the past. All she could do was endure quietly and hope that someday things might get better. Days turned into weeks, and the tension in the house grew heavier with every passing moment. The girl moved like a shadow, careful to make herself small and unnoticed. Each action she took was measured, calculated, as though the wrong move could ignite another storm. The accident with the dress had become more than just a mistake. It had become a symbol of her place in the house, a constant reminder that she could never relax. Her stepmother's anger seemed to linger in the air. Even in silence, there was an unspoken judgment, a sharpness that made her tremble. The girl tried to ignore it, telling herself that surviving another day without complaint was an achievement. But the small moments of tension had begun to take a toll. She noticed her hands shaking while washing dishes, her heart racing with every footstep she heard, her stomach tightening when she passed the dress still hanging where the accident had happened. It was during one of these ordinary afternoons that something unforgivable happened. The girl was carrying freshly washed dishes to the table. Her mind was elsewhere, thinking about schoolwork she still needed to complete and the small hope that maybe today her stepmother's anger would not fall on her. She walked carefully, counting each step, focusing entirely on keeping the dishes balanced. But as she stepped into the dining area, her foot slipped on a wet spot on the floor. The dishes tipped, falling with a crash that echoed through the house. Plates shattered, water spilled, and the girl froze, staring at the mess in horror. Her heart pounded in her chest, and tears welled up in her eyes. She could already hear the sharp voice of her stepmother before it even arrived. Her stepmother appeared immediately, her expression darker than the stormiest night. She looked at the broken plates, then at the girl, and something inside her snapped. The words came quickly, filled with rage and contempt. The girl tried to explain, tried to tell her it was an accident, but the voice of her stepmother drowned hers out. Every word was filled with accusation, blaming the girl for carelessness, stupidity, and disrespect. Each syllable was like a lash, leaving invisible scars across her heart. The girl stood there, silent and trembling. She did not cry immediately, though the tears were close. She knew that showing weakness could bring even more anger. Her stepmother's eyes glimmered with an unrelenting fury that made the girl want to disappear. Instead of just yelling, the stepmother demanded that the girl clean up the mess immediately. She used words that were cruel and sharp, cutting down the girl's spirit. She reminded her of past mistakes, mocking her for accidents that had happened weeks or even months ago. The girl's heart sank further. No matter how careful she was, it was never enough. As she cleaned up the broken dishes, a small piece cut her hand. Blood trickled down, but she did not dare cry out. The stepmother noticed, her expression unchanged. Instead of concern, there was only criticism. The girl's small injury was ignored, a reminder that her pain was irrelevant. After the dishes were cleaned and the floor mopped, the girl retreated to her room, hands stinging and heart heavy. She sat on her bed, tears finally slipping down her cheeks. She thought about her mother, about the warmth and comfort that had once filled her life. That warmth felt distant, almost unreachable. She felt alone, trapped in a house where even small mistakes brought punishment far beyond their size. Days passed in a blur of chores, tension, and fear. The girl became quieter, almost invisible. She stopped speaking unless spoken to. She moved slower, careful to avoid drawing attention. Even when she completed tasks perfectly, her stepmother found something to criticize. It was as if nothing she did could ever make life easier in that house. At school, she tried to act normal, to hide the fear and tension that followed her home. Her friends noticed she was quieter, more withdrawn, but she could not tell them the truth. She felt ashamed, as though her life inside that house was a secret she had to carry alone. She smiled when necessary, laughed when needed, but the smile never reached her eyes. Inside, a storm raged that no one could see. One evening, her father returned home earlier than usual. She hoped that perhaps he might notice her efforts, might see how carefully she moved through the house, how she tried to avoid mistakes, how she had been scolded again and again for accidents beyond her control. She wanted to tell him, wanted to share the fear that clung to her every moment, but the words would not come. She stayed in her corner, silent, her eyes on the floor. Her stepmother, as always, greeted him with a bright smile and light words. The girl could see the contrast, how easily her stepmother shifted between anger and charm. The father's attention was drawn to her stepmother's words, to the calm and pleasant appearance, while the girl's quiet suffering went unnoticed. She realized that she could not rely on him to see the truth, could not rely on him to protect her. That night, as she lay in bed, the girl made a decision. She would continue to survive, but she could not let herself be completely broken. The small moments of hope she clung to, the memories of her mother, the thought of kindness somewhere in the world, they became a lifeline. She realized that if she did not hold on to something, the constant fear and punishment would consume her entirely. She thought about ways to navigate the house without drawing attention. She planned her movements, thought about her chores, and imagined ways to avoid anger. Her mind became a careful map of the household, each room a space to move carefully, each step a decision to ensure she stayed unnoticed. The accident with the dishes had shown her that even the smallest misstep could have devastating consequences in those moments. The girl learned a hard truth. Her stepmother's anger was not something that could be reasoned with or avoided completely. It existed as a constant presence waiting for an opportunity to strike. The only control she had was over herself, over her actions, and over the way she endured the storm. Even as she accepted this, a part of her remained defiant. A part of her refused to believe that life would always be like this. She imagined a future where she could be free, where mistakes were met with understanding rather than anger, where she could feel safe and valued. That hope, fragile as it was, became her secret strength. It allowed her to move through each day with the smallest spark of courage. Even when fear pressed heavily against her chest, the girl's life continued, marked by careful obedience and quiet suffering. But underneath, her spirit began to grow in small ways. She learned to read the moods of those around her, to anticipate anger, to navigate the household like a map of hidden traps. Each day was a challenge, but each day also built a resilience she did not yet fully understand. She knew that one day she would have to face life beyond the house, and the lessons she learned in these dark days would be her shield. And though the accident with the dishes had brought unforgivable cruelty, it also revealed the truth. The girl was stronger than she realized. Each moment of fear, each tear shed in secret, each silent prayer for understanding, these were the building blocks of a courage she had yet to fully claim. The storm inside the house raged on, but inside her, a quiet fire began to burn, one that could never be extinguished by anger or cruelty. The following weeks passed in a blur of repetition and quiet fear. The girl moved through the house like a shadow, careful to avoid drawing any attention. Every day brought a new challenge, a new opportunity for her stepmother to find fault. The dress, still hanging as a reminder of the first accident, seemed to watch her, a silent judge that never forgave. School became her small escape, though even there she carried the weight of the house. She walked through the corridors with her books clutched tightly, trying to lose herself in lessons and the chatter of friends. Sometimes she laughed, sometimes she smiled, but the shadow of her home followed her. Teachers noticed her quietness, her reluctance to participate fully, but she brushed off questions with small, careful answers. She had learned to keep her struggles to herself. At home, chores continued to dominate her life. Washing dishes, cleaning floors, folding clothes, each task was approached with extreme caution. One slip, one mistake, and the consequences could be harsh. Her stepmother's anger was unpredictable. sometimes erupting over trivial matters. The girl learned to anticipate it, to move slowly, to speak softly, and to never meet her eyes for too long. Silence became her shield. But even as the days passed, the girl felt something stirring inside her. A small voice of defiance, a tiny spark of hope. She realized that she could not allow herself to be broken completely. Each act of cruelty, each sharp word, each moment of unfair blame, these were challenges she had to endure. But they also gave her a hidden strength. She began to observe, to plan, to find small ways to protect herself. One afternoon, while folding the laundry, her stepmother entered the room, her eyes scanning the neatly folded clothes. Without warning, she grabbed a freshly ironed shirt and held it up, accusing the girl of not being careful enough. The girl tried to explain that she had followed instructions exactly, but her voice trembled. The stepmother's sharp gaze made her shrink back. The girl realized that reason would not help here. Anger could not be calmed with explanations. She had to endure. Instead of arguing, she focused on her task, folding the rest of the clothes with meticulous care. Her hands worked automatically, but her mind was alert. She noticed her stepmother's movements, anticipated her glances, and learned to avoid triggering anger. Each small victory, finishing a chore without complaint, moving without incident, became a secret triumph. Despite the harshness of the household, small moments of kindness appeared. Sometimes a neighbor would smile at her as she passed by, or a teacher would offer a gentle word of encouragement at school. These moments were fleeting but precious, tiny reminders that the world beyond her home could be gentle and understanding. They became her anchors, small pieces of hope to hold on to in the storm. One evening, her father came home earlier than usual. The girl watched him from a distance, hoping he might notice her efforts, might see how carefully she navigated the house, how she endured the constant tension. But he was distracted, preoccupied with work and life outside. Her stepmother greeted him warmly, recounting her day with charm and ease. The girl remained in the background, silent and unseen. After dinner, her stepmother sent her to clean the living room. The girl moved carefully, arranging cushions, wiping surfaces, and dusting shelves. Every movement was precise, every gesture cautious. She worked quickly, but quietly, aware that any misstep could trigger anger. Her hands were sore, her back ached, but she endured. She had learned that endurance was her only option. While cleaning, she noticed a small crack in the floorboard. Her stepmother would likely scold her if she mentioned it, blaming her for not noticing earlier. The girl decided to leave it, knowing that some battles were not worth fighting. Survival required patience, careful observation, and quiet acceptance. She began to see that the house was a place of constant calculation, where even small details mattered, and every action had consequences. That night, she lay in bed, she thought about the future. She imagined a life beyond this house, a life where mistakes were met with understanding, where kindness was abundant, and where she could be herself without fear. These thoughts were her refuge, a secret world she created in her mind to survive the harsh reality around her. Sleep came slowly, filled with restless dreams of past mistakes and imagined dangers. She woke several times during the night, each time feeling the lingering fear of her stepmother's anger. Yet, even in the darkness, she clung to the small spark of hope that had begun to grow within her. In the following days, she began to notice patterns. Her stepmother's anger often came after long periods of boredom or frustration. She realized that timing and awareness could help her avoid the worst outbursts. She learned to read expressions, to anticipate moods, and to adjust her actions accordingly. Each small insight became a tool, a way to navigate the household more safely. School continued to offer brief respite. She immersed herself in books, in lessons, in the laughter of friends. These moments were precious, a reminder that the world could be gentle and kind. She began to dream of a future where she could live freely, pursue her interests, and find people who valued her for who she was. Her stepmother's anger, however, remained unpredictable. Sometimes it erupted without warning, fueled by minor incidents or perceived slights. The girl learned to remain calm, to accept the outbursts without reacting, and to retreat when necessary. She discovered that emotional endurance was as important as physical effort. Every day was a lesson in resilience, patience, and careful observation. One day, while arranging the shelves, she overheard her stepmother speaking on the phone. The words were harsh, full of complaint and criticism. The girl realized that the anger directed at her was not always personal. It was a reflection of frustration, stress, and dissatisfaction. Understanding this did not make the pain disappear, but it gave her a small measure of clarity. She began to see that she could navigate the household with strategy rather than constant fear. Even as she endured, she did not lose her sense of self entirely. She wrote small notes to herself in secret, reminding herself of her dreams, her goals, and her hopes. She recorded her thoughts in a small notebook, a private world where her fears could be expressed and her victories, however small, could be celebrated. These notes became a lifeline, a way to preserve her identity amid the constant pressure. The girl's resilience began to grow. She discovered that patience, careful observation, and quiet determination could help her survive the harshest moments. Each day became a balance between endurance and subtle strategy, between fear and hope. She learned that while she could not control her stepmother's anger, she could control her response, her actions, and her inner strength. And so, life continued. The girl moved through each day with careful steps, quiet obedience, and a growing sense of resilience. She endured the harshness of her household, finding small moments of hope and refuge where she could. Each challenge, each act of cruelty, became a lesson in endurance and strategy, building a hidden strength that no one could see. Through it all, she clung to the thought that one day she would be free. One day, she would live in a world where mistakes were met with understanding, where kindness was abundant, and where she could be herself without fear. That thought, fragile and distant though it was, became her guiding light. It gave her the courage to endure, the determination to survive, and the quiet hope that the future held something better for her. Time passed, and the girl's life continued under the weight of tension, fear, and constant caution. Each day was a careful dance of obedience and endurance. She had learned to navigate the house, to anticipate anger, and to protect herself in subtle ways. The small spark of hope she carried in her heart never went out. Even when darkness seemed overwhelming, one morning, something unusual happened. A neighbor, someone who had noticed the girl's quiet demeanor and frequent sadness, came by to check on her. They spoke gently, asking how she was, offering a kind word that she had not heard in a long time. The girl's heart lifted slightly, a reminder that not all people were cruel, that kindness still existed outside her home. She wanted to explain, to tell someone about her struggles, but the fear of her stepmother's wrath held her back. Still, the encounter was enough to make her feel a little less alone. Her stepmother continued to impose strict rules and harsh punishments. But the girl's resilience had grown. She had learned not to react immediately, to observe, to understand, and to plan her moves carefully. She was no longer entirely controlled by fear. She had found small ways to protect herself, to create moments of safety and peace in her daily routine. Every careful step, every quiet action, every moment of endurance built a silent strength inside her. One afternoon, the girl's father came home unexpectedly early. He noticed the tension in the house, the careful movements of his daughter, and the small fear that lingered in her eyes. For the first time, he saw beyond the surface, beyond the pleasant appearances and polite words of his wife. He realized that the girl had been living under constant pressure, that her efforts to survive were unnoticed, and that she had been suffering in silence for far too long. He spoke to her gently, asking questions about school, her friends, and how she felt at home. The girl, hesitant at first, slowly began to open up. She spoke of small things, of chores, of the fear she felt, and eventually, she shared the incidents that had caused her so much pain. Her words were quiet, careful, but they carried the weight of years of endurance. Her father listened, truly listened, without judgment, without interruption. The girl felt a relief she had never experienced before, a release of the tension she had carried alone. After understanding the situation, the father confronted the stepmother. He spoke firmly about fairness, kindness, and respect. reminding her that cruelty and anger should never be directed at a child. The girl watched as the dynamic in the house shifted, the fear that had dominated her life slowly lifting. Her stepmother, faced with the consequences of her actions and the father's authority, had little choice but to change her behavior. Over time, the house began to feel different. The tension that had hung in the air like a heavy cloud started to dissipate. The girl could move through the rooms without the constant fear of anger erupting. She could laugh, smile, and speak without immediately bracing for criticism. Life was not perfect, but it was safer, calmer, and more predictable. The girl began to focus on her own growth. She pursued her studies with determination, knowing that education could provide a path to freedom and independence. She found joy in small things, reading a favorite book, drawing quietly in her notebook, walking outside in the fresh air. Each moment of happiness, no matter how brief, was a celebration of her resilience and courage. She also began to form stronger connections outside the home. Friends, neighbors, and teachers became sources of support and understanding. Their kindness reinforced the small spark of hope that had always lived inside her. She learned to trust again, to believe that not everyone would judge or hurt her. These relationships became lifelines, helping her to rebuild confidence and self-worth. One day, the girl looked back on the events that had once seemed insurmountable, the accidents, the anger, the harsh punishments. She realized that those experiences, while painful, had shaped her into a stronger, more resilient person. She had learned patience, endurance, observation, and strategic thinking. Most importantly, she had learned that her value was not defined by the anger or cruelty of others. With the support of her father and the kindness of others, she gradually began to take control of her life. She set goals, planned for the future, and took steps toward independence. The lessons she had learned in her difficult home life became tools for navigating the world outside. She discovered an inner strength she had never known existed, a quiet courage that would carry her through challenges ahead. The dress, once a symbol of fear and punishment, now held a different meaning. It reminded her of the challenges she had faced, the pain she had endured, and the resilience she had developed. Each time she saw it, she remembered the small spark of hope she had clung to, the inner strength that had grown over time, and the freedom she had fought for in her mind and heart. Her life was not without difficulties, but she now faced them with confidence and determination. She had learned that cruelty could not define her, that fear could be managed, and that endurance could lead to growth. She had discovered the power of resilience, the importance of hope, and the value of support from those who truly cared. In the end, the girl's journey was one of survival, strength, and eventual triumph. She had faced unforgivable actions, endured emotional hardship, and navigated a household filled with tension and fear. Yet through it all, she had emerged stronger, wiser, and more determined than ever. Her story was a testament to the human spirit, a reminder that even in the darkest moments, hope and resilience could light the way forward. The girl now moved through life with a quiet confidence. Aware of her own strength and capable of facing challenges with courage, she carried the lessons of her past, not as burdens, but as tools to guide her toward a brighter, freer future. And with every step, every choice, every moment of growth, she embraced the possibility of a life defined not by fear, but by hope, resilience, and the promise of better days ahead. Life after the changes in the house felt different, almost surreal at first. The girl woke up one morning and noticed the silence was no longer heavy or threatening. Instead, it was calm, almost comforting. She had grown used to treading lightly, to moving with care, to anticipating anger at every turn. Now, for the first time in years, she could breathe without fear tightening her chest. The weight that had always pressed down on her seemed lighter. Though she knew the scars of the past would always be part of her, she went about her chores with a newfound sense of calm. Dishes no longer felt like a trap, and folding laundry was not an act of survival but just another task in the day. Her stepmother still spoke sharply at times, but the harshness was tempered by the presence of her father, who made it clear that cruelty would not be tolerated. The girl felt safer. With that safety came a sense of relief she had not experienced in years. School became even more important to her. She threw herself into her studies with renewed determination. It was no longer just a way to escape the household for a few hours. It became a path to independence. Her teachers noticed her focus and her quiet determination, encouraging her and offering support when they could. Friends began to see her smile more often. Her laughter was less forced. She began to open up slowly, though cautiously. One day, as she walked home from school, a group of children were playing in the street. She watched for a moment, remembering the days when she would have joined them without a second thought. Now her confidence had grown, and she found herself stepping forward, joining in quietly. At first her movements were hesitant, but soon she was running, laughing, and feeling the lightness of being a child again. The joy was simple, pure, and deeply healing. At home, the girl began to take small steps toward asserting herself. She spoke more openly with her father, sharing her thoughts and ideas, and he listened, valuing her perspective. She suggested small changes in the house, ways to make chores easier, and he supported her. Her stepmother, while still strict, began to realize that the girl was not the same child she had once seen as fragile and fearful. The balance of power shifted subtly, with the girl finding her voice and her sense of self growing stronger every day. The dress, once a symbol of fear and punishment, now served as a reminder of how far she had come. She remembered the day it had been ruined, the anger it had provoked, and the fear it had caused. Yet now, looking at it, she felt a sense of triumph. She had endured, she had survived, and she had grown stronger because of the challenges she had faced. It was no longer a mark of failure, but a testament to resilience. Her father began to involve her more in decisions, seeking her input on household matters and valuing her judgment. The girl felt pride and responsibility, a feeling she had been denied for so long. With each decision she contributed to, her confidence grew, and the home slowly transformed from a place of fear into a space where her presence mattered and was respected. Despite the improvements, the girl never forgot the lessons of endurance and caution she had learned. She remained aware of the potential for anger and disappointment, not out of fear, but out of careful thought. She had grown wise beyond her years, understanding that life could be unpredictable, but also that she had the power to navigate it with intelligence, patience, and resilience. As time passed, the girl began to explore her own interests and talents. She discovered a love for reading, writing, and drawing, spending hours creating stories and sketches that allowed her imagination to soar. These activities were more than hobbies. They were a way to express herself, to process emotions, and to dream beyond the walls of her home. Each completed story or drawing was a small victory, proof of her creativity and inner strength. Her relationships with others also deepened. She found friends who appreciated her, listened to her, and offered support. She began to trust again, understanding that not everyone would judge or hurt her. These connections became a network of care and encouragement, reinforcing the hope she had carried silently for so long. She realized that love and friendship could coexist with the hardships she had endured, and that people could offer kindness and understanding without expecting perfection in return. The girl also began to mentor younger children in her neighborhood, offering guidance, comfort, and understanding. She remembered the loneliness and fear she had once felt and wanted to help others navigate their challenges. Through these acts of care, she found purpose and fulfillment, seeing the impact of her empathy and wisdom. Each small interaction was a reminder that she could transform pain into something positive, that her experiences could be a source of strength and guidance for others. The house, once a place of constant tension, had gradually become a space of learning, growth, and cautious peace. Her stepmother's behavior was no longer a constant threat. Tempered by the father's authority and the girl's growing confidence, while challenges still arose, the girl faced them with courage, strategy, and patience. The fear that had dominated her childhood had been replaced with awareness and resilience, tools that would serve her for the rest of her life. The girl also began to think about her future beyond the home. She dreamed of opportunities to study, travel, and explore the world on her own terms. Each goal was approached with careful planning and determination. She understood that freedom was not something that would simply happen. It had to be earned, worked for, and protected. The lessons of her past had prepared her for this journey, equipping her with skills of endurance, observation, and strategic thinking. With each passing day, she grew more confident, more independent, and more aware of her own worth. The experiences that had once seemed unbearable had become the foundation of her strength. She realized that life would always have challenges, but she now had the courage and knowledge to face them. Her journey was no longer defined by fear, but by hope, resilience, and the possibility of growth. The girl's story became one of transformation. From fear to courage, from silence to voice, and from helplessness to self-reliance, she learned that while the past could leave scars, it could also provide lessons and insights that shaped her character. Each challenge she faced had strengthened her, preparing her for a future where she could thrive, not just survive. As she looked toward the future, the girl felt a quiet sense of pride. She had endured what many might not have survived, navigated a household filled with tension and anger, and emerged stronger, wiser, and more capable. Her experiences had taught her empathy, patience, and resilience, qualities that would guide her in life. And so, the girl moved forward, carrying the lessons of her past as tools for her journey. She embraced each day with hope, courage, and determination. The hardships she had faced became part of her story, but they no longer defined her. She had reclaimed her life, her voice, and her sense of self. With each step, she built a future full of possibility, strength, and the promise of a life shaped by resilience, hope, and the courage to face whatever challenges lay ahead.